Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another week here at Wired Differently. We have me, Christina Blue Hooper, your business designer, Victoria Queen V Caldwell, your expert in all things people systems and being a second in command to crazy entrepreneurs like me, and Mindset Melanie Branch, who can tame any ADHD woman's brain so that you can do what you need to do on a daily basis in your life and in your business. So, we have a really good topic today because client fulfillment is one of the most important parts of your business, right? Because you make a promise to your client, you have to fulfill on that promise to your client. You have to do it in a way that your staff can support you, that feels aligned with who you are, that delivers results that clients are actually looking for in a way that is scalable and not crazy draining. And there's a lot of moving parts to all of that, right? So we're going to be talking about especially the integrity side of it, the promises that we make to clients and how we live up to those, get out of them if we made the wrong promises, and not hurt our reputations, not hurt our sanity, not hurt our freedom by overcommitting to clients and not having any time left in the day. Whew, that's a big topic, right? So I've got quite a few questions that have come in, but before we dive into that, Victoria, what does client fulfillment mean to you as somebody who's an expert of people systems and getting teams on board to do the mission that the entrepreneur's setting out to do?
So client fulfillment for me means delivering what you promised to the client. And delivering it, and for me, it's not fulfilled unless it's done with excellence. That's a personal thing. It's not just throwing something out there just to check the box. It's really doing a great job and fulfilling at bare minimum. I always strive to exceed expectations, but bare minimum delivering what you promised. To me, that's what integrity is all about. Now, that also comes into being very realistic about your team capacity to deliver. You and your not that you don't have the skill, but do you have the capacity? And I'm always talking about flow, but did you promise something that is going to take you out of flow to deliver? And I see that with a lot of creatives because they're looking at the big picture, but not necessarily getting into the itty gritty details of what that means from a fulfillment standpoint. That often comes in. And so when it comes to the ideation side, especially in the consulting world, like the consulting world and that, but when it comes to the delivery side, sometimes it goes a little bit sideways and left, because now if you have to engage a team, manage a team, you have to really be clear on what you can deliver at a high level and what your team can deliver at a high level. And that part is often missed.
Yeah, 100%. So team capacity, keeping everybody in flow, doing the tasks that they need to do, making sure you deliver with excellence. I love all that.
And then the time frame. Again, you know how I feel about creators' time frames. Like and this is just a personal experience, because I always add at least 3, sometimes 4
Yeah, I feel
times.
like when you first started working with me, it was like, we're going to double that time. And then you're like, triple that time. And then we steadily worked up to quadruple that time.
But I don't remember ever saying a double.
You did in the very beginning, before we really started digging into things. You're like, I almost always like double the times that people tell me that it's going to take them to do stuff. But then you got to know me a little bit more and you're like, no, we triple. And then it steadily worked to quadruple.
Or quadruple. Yeah. I must have been feeling a little bit more with you. I must have felt like, okay, let's double it. I don't know why.
But everything's always 20 minutes or 2 days. Like, I cannot fathom that anything could take me more than 2 days to get done. Like, it feels doable. If life, all of the dominoes lined up the right way, and that's the catch, I could do it in 2 days, right? So what about you, Melanie? What does client fulfillment mean to you?
A lot of us Neuro-Spicies know a lot of, or a little bit about a lot of things. And so me specializing in mindset, because I work with you two, I'm also in my own brain, a bit of an expert when it comes to business design and a bit of an expert when it comes to people systems, or at least getting what you want out of people and knowing how to identify their strengths and encourage that. So in my mind, it's most important that you know exactly what you're promising someone, and then that you're doing your own personal work so that you don't feel guilty for not doing everything for them. You know, a consultant is a really good person to hire to ideate new concepts, and a coach is a really good person to hire to execute new concepts. So if I had a client recently go through this where they're shifting from providing one service to another, and they're like, I don't know, maybe I should be a coach. And I said, you will know if you want to be a coach before you're a coach, because everybody will think that you're a coach because that's what you want to do. You want to get the best out of people. Don't think that just because there's a huge coaching industry that that's what you need to do. So I think it's most important, especially when it comes to integrity, to know what you promised and fulfill what you promised and not feel guilty for not being able to fix every problem in your client's life.
Staying in your lane. Huge, huge. And yeah, I mean, we learn so much stuff because we have so many varied special interests. We go down rabbit holes. We're good at research. And like before we know it, we know a ton. But we undervalue all of that knowledge most of the time. And we try and use all of it for everybody that we work with. There is so much freedom to staying in your lane. Like I was a marketer for many, many, many years before I became a business design consultant. And I'm just like being able to say, here's a little bit of information, but I'm not the expert marketer. We have one at the academy. Her name is Pam. Go chat with her. That felt so good the first time I got to say that to a student. And I was like, oh yes. Right. Because it leaves my brain cells free to do the things that I want to do. Right. And coming at the same question to myself, like, what do I think client fulfillment is? To me, I'm looking at it from the business design standpoint. I'm ideating as a consultant, and I'm looking at what are the products and services that we're even going to put into place, and how are we going to set those products and services up in such a way that it supports flow, that you can bring a team on to execute it, that it keeps you in your lane. Because we're not just going to sit here and take the stuff that we're already selling and be like, oh, if we tweak this and tweak this, it's going to meet these needs. It probably won't. Occasionally it does. Most of the time it doesn't. Most of the time we're kind of going from the ground up again and building new products and services in a way that supports all of that. Because most people didn't set their stuff up like that in the beginning.
Right.
So it's kind of like when you're trying to clean a really cluttered house, sometimes you have to pull everything out and like, okay, here's the space. What would we like to do with it? It's kind of that vibe. I just got done decluttering and cleaning my whole house. So that feels very real to me. Just decluttering and cleaning one closet enabled the ability for me to declutter and clean the whole rest of the house, because there was a lot of storage space in that closet that I had just
momentum. Yes.
Yeah, it was an uphill battle to get that one closet clean. But once that one closet was clean, I was like, oh, I'm feeling better about this now. And like did the whole thing. Feels good. All right. So let's look at our first question here. This one's a big one. So if you sign a contract with a client that you regret, now what? Right? Like, what are your first steps? So I'm going to invite Melanie probably to jump in on this one first, because there's a lot of mindset swirlies that are happening in this standpoint, right? You signed a contract, you're probably starting to work with the client a little bit, and you're being like, oh man, this was a mistake.
I can speak directly from my own experience. And a lot of us have the tendency to put on the rose-colored glasses and to not always listen to our intuition and the thoughts that are coming from your gut of like, no, this is not the right person. And again, you start a business because you want to make money and you want the freedom to go do all the things that you want to do. And in the beginning, you're not exactly making that amount of money. So anytime somebody comes along and says, hey, I would like to hire you, we have the tendency to say, you got it. And then, you get 2 or 3 calls in with that person and they ask you, do you not like me? And you go, what? No, not at all. Right. Lying has never really been my strong suit. So really, 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 before you even sign the contract, know exactly who you want to help and what you want to help them do. because once we're all going to get into a contract that we regret. And when you realize you regret it, you better have a pep talk with yourself before every time you talk to that client to make sure that they don't realize that you don't like them. And you better write down how much you don't like this feeling so that the next time you are wavering on whether or not you should sign another client because you're not 100% sure, you look at that notebook and remember what it feels like to work with somebody that you don't like. And I actually, today, I was scrolling a little bit this morning on my FYP, and a creator came across who was like, oh, this headhunter was reaching out to me about this job. And so I was reading about it and what I would have to do and who I'd have to work with. And I literally felt pure, I was repulsed by the idea of having to meet new people that I wasn't in charge of, that I wasn't going to be the head man in command, and I was going to have to assimilate. I was like, God, I would never do that again. So really take a step back and say, who do I want to surround myself with? Because that's one of the reasons we all started our business, is so that, I came from the restaurant industry and property management, where you're surrounded by people that you don't like, and you have to act like you like them. And I just don't have any of that left in me. So I would say, if you're in something that you regret, write down what that feels like so that you can refer to that next time you're not sure.
What about you, Victoria? What are your thoughts?
Since Melanie already talked about personally, the guardrails, pretty much what you talk about, Christina, the guardrails, if you can't get out of the contract, or it's too costly to get out of the contract, because maybe you made a commitment that you can't, because one, if you can afford, if it's worth your sanity, you can at least end the contract and return money or a partial money. You would have to negotiate and get that if it's worth, and sometimes it is. I think, Christina, you've had one of those situations.
Yeah, I've had a couple of those over the years where I had the ability to issue a refund. So I used the language in the contract that said, I'm going to terminate this. This is, my commitments to the contract. Every contract should have an exit clause for if you want to cancel and if they want to cancel. What those terms are going to look like, what that refund's going to look like. And you can get with ChatGPT and ask it questions. It's going to put stuff together. You can have it reword whatever it does into plain language so that it's easy to understand. You can ask it about certain things. You can throw scenarios at it, like, what if this happens? What if this happens? How do I make sure I'm protected? What would happen if I wanted to cancel? And it can deal with hypotheticals for your contracts. So spend a few minutes with ChatGPT and think that through. But yeah, I've had contracts I've had to stay in because I needed the revenue, and I've had contracts that I got out of.
And maybe the client is not that, because I would if it's really draining you and costing you, I would say try to get out of it if you can. If you can't afford to, then you have to fulfill. But if you can, then you can just have that conversation with the client in a way that it's beneficial to them. You know what? I signed this contract under this, and I realize, it's not going to be fair for me to continue when I can't deliver, or I'm unable to deliver. Maybe Melody have better wording for that, in a way that will meet the standards that I expect of myself and I want to give to you. And that, kind of shows some integrity, and then maybe soften if they want to, just go ahead and let you out of the contract without it, major issues. And if I can't, then, it's one of those things, and you do what Melanie says, you look at all of the things. And I really like that in terms of writing it down in the moment, because once you get out of it and you feel so much better, after a while, you tend to forget how bad you felt. And so when you're in the moment, that's the moment to write it down, regardless of whether you get out of it or not, so you can have that ready for when you are looking to build more contracts or update your customer profile to repel these type of people. So that's
another big thing that you can do too is expectation resetting or setting with clients. Because I think sometimes we get into contracts we regret, or at least this has been my experience, when we didn't fully understand the scope before we walked in. So like we had an idea that the client needed this, like they needed a new website. But what we didn't realize when we quoted that, build that out and did all that stuff was there were 200 blog articles saved as drafts. And we didn't know we were going to have to move them all over to the new system because I couldn't see them on the front end of the website. So now this project that was like a 10-page website is 210 pages.
Right.
You know, I've had that happen to me I don't know how many times. So sometimes it's instant that it's like, oh crap, I didn't understand that this was the scope of this. Right?
And those are the kind of things that are kind of impossible. And that's why you really have to have some clauses about like the scope. Yeah. Because if your scope didn't include moving 200 blog articles, then you can go back and say, look, you didn't mention upfront that you had 200 blog articles that I need to move over. I can move them over, but it's going to cost some extra because it's going to take extra resources because this was not communicated up front and it wasn't factored into the quote. Yeah. I didn't know you had 200 blog articles in drafts. You didn't tell me. And you can't ask every single question.
Yeah.
You know, you can ask enough. And even in, let's say, if you're doing your consultation, you can say, is there anything else that I don't know that I should?
Yeah.
You know,
sometimes it's really obvious, like that situation with the blog articles. It's easy to go back and negotiate it. It's easy to show to the client, you know, hey, look, I budgeted for this and now it's right. And sometimes it's a little less obvious. Like, you know, I'm working in business design. So I take clients that tell me they've had a lot of success with these products and services and they've had a lot of success with this type of client. And so like, okay, let's plan and let's build for that. But then you start getting into it and it's like your success is you sold it 2 times and your profit margin was negative both of those times. But we didn't know that until we build a whole system around it and start looking at all their stuff. And it's like, holy crap, right? Like same thing could happen in like Melanie's world where, you know, somebody seems like they just need some mindset work and you get in there a couple weeks in and you're like, you need therapy.
Yeah. I just recently found out two of my current clients are getting 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night.
Oof. And like, you know, another example in Victoria's case, I know we're having to build out stuff in her audits and things that she's doing for her products to make sure that the clients she's working with have the ability to even work with the team.
Yeah.
Right? Because like just making sure they have one isn't enough of a criteria if they have a bad team, if they have the wrong people in the wrong roles, if they have no idea how to manage them. Right? Like your starting point is a lot different than a well-oiled team all assigned to the right roles. And now we just need to get everybody performing at the right level. So like sometimes you're just not going to know what you're walking into, I guess is my point. And you have to be willing to reset expectations. You have to have clauses in your contracts that allow you to reset expectations, allow you to say if something is outside of the scope or things come up in the course of working together, we may need to adjust. And we'll talk about it ahead of time. If there's going to be any cost or timeline changes, you'll be notified. But right? Have that stuff baked into your contracts in the beginning.
That's one of the reasons one of my major challenges is 2 things really. And I own the first one. Like if I took on a client or project without them fully understanding what was happening, where they went wrong, what I'm doing, the education part was missing, let's say. But another thing is when you quote pricing based on flat rates. And some projects are like that. Right now, I don't have too many of them that are like that. But for things that may take a certain amount, and especially if it's consulting or coaching or whatever, I stop doing the package price. If I do a package price, I will set a time limit on it.
Yeah.
But mostly what I'm doing now is, okay, this is going to be this much per month because sometimes clients delay.
Yeah.
They delay it and you might say, oh, this is going to take me about 5 months. Well, they want to pay for 5 months, even if it's their fault and it takes you 9 months to deliver something because of all of their inefficiencies. So what I do now is this is going to take this much time. And I mean, not say this much time, but I give a realistic time frame, which I always add a buffer. And I said, but this is, if there are delays, especially if there are delays not on my dime, on my end, then they're paying me monthly. So they have to, and they're less likely to just play with your time and your money that way because they're paying for it.
Yeah.
So
now, that brings up a really good point, though, because like a lot of times people benefit from packaged productized services where it's like it's this time frame, it's this steps, it's this services. Like Melanie's coaching programs are a perfect example of that. There's fixed containers, they have prices, there's a set series of steps that you're working through, there's a set number of meetings, Packaged and productized services work really good in some situations. With Victoria's business model, we had to play with it a little bit because every entrepreneur is a little different. So while the base, this is what we want to have, is defined, how much work it's going to take to get there is not. It depends on where the business stands. So what we did to kind of insulate and prepare for that was a paid audit and planning service in the beginning. So somebody can pay her to get in there, to look at it, to figure out what it's going to take, and to create an actual plan for what implementation is going to look like to fix all these holes. Now, the benefit to them to paying for that is they can take that plan and go run with it. They can choose to execute parts of it themselves. They can choose to take some of it to someone else, or they can choose to work with Victoria if it's a good fit to continue to move forward. And even though the package is completely customized, the process to build it is productized and standard. So that lets Victoria really understand the scope before building a custom package. So it's really important to understand that I think a lot of people run off and build all these custom packages without that audit planning step in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then that gets them into huge trouble and derails most of their business because every package for every client is different. You can't standardize anything. You can't build SOPs. You can't get consistency in your business. You can't bring staff on to help. You're not getting every client to the same success point because you're taking completely different paths all of the time. So you can never optimize for the best path from A to B. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about like completely customized or productized services. Sometimes there's a blend. Sometimes it's all productized. It is never good to be all customized unless you were doing like a truly concierge premium thing.
$50,000 a month sort of situation.
Probably even more than that. Like the example that comes to mind to me is the real life Wizard of Oz, Steve Sims.
Yeah.
And like he did crazy stuff. Like you want to have a fancy dinner with a few people in front of the Mona Lisa? We can make that happen. You want to go on an exclusive dive down to the Titanic? We can make that happen, right? So he was making like the most impossible dreams for the richest people happen, right? So in that kind of situation, cool. Everything's customized. Enjoy. You're getting compensated more than adequately for the thing. For the rest of us mere mortals, not a great strategy, right? Now, I think we kind of hit on this next question a little bit, but let's dive into it a little. So how do I keep my word without feeling resentful towards my clients? I think this dovetails into our previous conversation. Like we signed a contract that we regret. What do we do? If we have to stay in it and you're kind of low key hating on the client that's keeping you trapped in the contract because you need to stay in the contract and fulfill it, Melanie, this feels like it's a mindset question. What do you do here? How do you keep the word without the resentfulness?
I mean, I think it all goes back to our current mission at the Academy, which is trying to get everybody to 10 case study level clients, which means you know exactly who you help and what you help them do, and you know the scope of your role in all of that, right? You mentioned my productized services. I have a 6-week program and I have a 6-month program. And if you're not in one of those, but I've worked with you in the past, I'm probably going to check up on you and see what you're doing and see what's going on, simply because that's my favorite thing to do. But I'm going to be listening to my client messages first at any point in time and responding to them. So when it's about managing resentment, the first step in that is knowing who you help and what you help them do. And if you're currently in a relationship with a client that you resent, know what it is. Take note about what it is you resent about them. They're not doing the work. They keep asking me to do more. They're messaging me outside of the proper times, whatever it is, so that moving forward, you no longer accept work with people that are going to do that sort of thing. And everybody knows this, and you guys will all agree with me. The person that wants you to discount your work is always the person that wants you to do 10 times more. So one way to prevent this from happening is to raise your prices right now, because Christine, I remember a couple months ago, years ago, I don't even know because time's not real. You were talking to a potential client about the program that you were getting ready to run. It was beta or something. And they said, you need to be charging more for this. You can't, I want to pay you more than this. And we've seen it with one of our students, Christina, who's now a mentor too. She was talking to somebody that she knew about X, Y, and Z. Here's what we're going to do. Here's the cost. And they were like, I'm going to pay you more than that because this is worth more than that. So really understanding your value, and resentment is a direct response to not being valued according to what you deserve.
Yeah. I would say lead with curiosity too. And me and Victoria got to experience this with one client that was just driving me up the wall. I mean, I could not have a conversation with this woman anymore. It was driving me insane. Every email, every conversation, everything. And Victoria had a chat with her and got to the root of everything that was going on with her, that was happening behind the scenes that I was not aware of. She didn't communicate any of that to me. I'm proceeding as if everything is a certain way. And then we find out it's the complete opposite. Right? You remember which one I'm thinking about.
I know who you're talking about too.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was just leading with curiosity and being like, especially in my case, like if somebody's behavior doesn't match what I expect their behavior to be in that situation, I'm like, I don't understand what's happening right now. I don't get why you're this way instead of this way. I don't get why you're responding like this when last week you were like this. Did not even occur to me that something might have happened. I just thought I was having a communication breakdown, didn't understand what was going on. And so lead with curiosity. Like if you're feeling resentful towards why they're acting a certain way or behaving a certain way, see if you can figure out why. Have a conversation with them and just be like, I don't understand the shift. I don't understand why you're behaving this way. I don't understand why this is going the way it's going. Can we have a reset, clarity call, whatever you want to call it? I just want to touch base before we keep moving.
And I will say to dovetail on that, or kind of before, is to look at and identify why you're feeling resentful. Because if you're feeling resentful because you said yes when you shouldn't have, then that's a you issue. That's a overgiving, people-pleasing issue that you could have just said no. That's not the client's issue. That's something you have to work on, and which is what we do at the academy and with our mentors. One of them is specifically, we're dealing with this particular issue, the overgiving, the people pleasing. When you take on more than you should have, and you're feeling resentful toward the client for asking for more, and you said yes. Now, if you said no, or if you said yes, and it's going to cost, and this is what it's going to do, maybe that's the reason you're feeling resentment towards them, but the issue is not them. The issue is you. And that's what I see, at least in a lot of my clients, because they are overgivers and they do too much and they don't have strong boundaries, which is another thing we teach at the academy, on how to set these boundaries, so that knowing that you have this characteristic, and until you can overcome it, you have to put, boundaries, guardrails in place, not just for the clients, for you, to not sabotage you.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's a huge
Sometimes
one.
we're our worst enemies. Sometimes
Mhm.
we're
I
doing
think
the
most
most.
of the time we are our own worst enemy. It's not even some of the time. I feel like that's most of the time. Nobody else is as
Yeah.
hard on us as we are on ourselves.
Oh yeah,
Always.
always. We are
So
so
let's
much
take the
harder.
flip side of this. So we've said we have a contract we regret and we had to stay in it, and that's where we have that resentful feeling. But then we have the flip side. I want to get out of it, but I don't want to hurt my reputation, right? This can be maybe this client came in through a referral and you don't want to look bad to the person who referred them in. It could be that this client has a pretty good audience, that you were expecting this client to be able to refer more business to you or whatever it is. They might be a keyboard warrior that's going to go leave negative reviews about your business online. Like, how do you get out of it without ruining your reputation?
I think personally, what I said earlier is having a very honest heart to heart, a conversation on integrity and letting them know that, look, I, the way this project is going, I won't be able to fill it at the standards that you deserve.
Yeah.
And based on my integrity, and I just want to, I don't want to continue to waste your time, any more money, any more time. I'm going to back out of this commitment because I'm not going to be able to fulfill it at the level that you would expect and that I would expect of myself. And instead of delivering a subpar product or service just to fulfill the bare minimum and take your money is unacceptable. In my book, it's unacceptable. And I think that might even increase your reputation because now they trust that you will do the right thing. Like one of my core values is integrity, and that's about doing the right thing, even if nobody's looking. And sometimes the right thing is the hardest thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And
think, mindset's important too, to just
yeah,
understand you're never going to miss anything that's meant for you. It's always worse in your head than it ever is in real life. And, you got to understand everything that we do every single day as human beings and as entrepreneurs is a learning lesson and is going to get you closer to at least one of your goals, no matter what it is. So, really not being so incredibly hard on yourself and imagining the worst possible case scenario. That's been a hard thing for a lot of us, is to get over the catastrophizing because something's happened in your past that completely blindsided you. And now your nervous system and brain has said, okay, well, we never want to get blindsided again. So let's imagine the worst possible case scenario for every chance and risk that we take or don't take. And that just keeps you playing small. And that's not what any of us are doing our businesses for.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, being prepared, and there are some things we don't have to catastrophize, but we can plan for predictable problems and be prepared for those. So, like one of the things that we teach at the academy, and I teach a lot, is preventable potholes, right? If we know there's some preventable potholes, how are we going to prepare? Your contract's going to be a big one, right? Your contract is going to outline how you exit something, how you handle if something goes sideways. It's also going to help you in the predictable pothole that a client might try to, to sue you or to go back and like do a chargeback on their credit card company and get the credit card company to take the payment back from you. And there's things that they can do. Your contract's going to be one of your biggest buffers in those situations. You
yes.
can choose not to take credit cards. If you feel like that's going to be a big enough problem, you can take bank transfers for larger transactions and not take credit cards for larger transactions. Most people are afraid to make that move and to do that, but it makes it easier on you in case somebody tries to do a chargeback. They're not just going to like yank, 5-10 grand out of your bank account.
Yeah. And
But
over a
there's
certain amount, they should all be. If you're doing high ticket 10, 20K, that's a bank transfer.
Yeah. And most of your payment providers, like processors and stuff like that, can do that now, right? So like Stripe, high level, you just release this feature so you can make it where your invoices are only through bank transfer per invoice. So if an invoice is at a higher dollar amount, you can make it bank transfer only. So there's things like that we can teach you that will help with some of these situations. But this is why you also have to have things like business savings. So if something does go wrong, you can issue refunds, you can handle chargebacks. You can deal with stuff like that. It's why you need to do things like having a law firm that you have access to. I've had Legal Shield for a very, very long time. They'll review any of my contracts. They will write letters to people on letterhead. It's amazing how much that can stop something if you need to do it. So being prepared in those ways. If somebody's going to go keyboard warrior and leave you a negative review online, know how you're going to respond. And you're always going to post a response with integrity. You're not going to remove the negative review unless it's just like completely, some people are just batshit. And then, there are cases where you just take the review down. But for the most part, you're going to respond professionally to negative reviews online. And it's actually going to help people buy from you. I had one client that freaked out years ago because they got a negative review online. And they're like, I don't know what to do. I want to delete it. I'm like, don't delete it. Don't delete it. Just respond professionally and courteously, because we've all been in like, a store or a fast food place where somebody was being incredibly rude and a-holy to the person behind the register. And we just sit there going like, man, I sympathize with the person behind the register. This person's crazy. Like, I'm not sympathizing with the other customer. I'm sympathizing with the cashier.
And
when
that's
what negative reviews are.
It makes them, especially when you can respond out of respect and kindness, or professionally, I'll put it this way. And what's that website that will help you do that? It's not ChatGPT, it's the one that can help you take the words you really want to
Goblin
say.
Tools.
Goblin Tools.
Goblin Tools. Yeah, you can post stuff in there and it'll help you reword it and make it more professional. Like, you can get all of the rage voice out in your head and you can get your favorite AI to respond more professionally. And at that point, you're not responding to the person who had the problem. You're performing for the other clients that would hire you based on how you handle this. Right? Because when we see a manager come out, defend their cashier, handle a client responsibly, get that situation diffused quickly, our respect for that company goes through the roof. Are they ever going to make that person happy? Never. But everybody else in line that witnessed? Yeah. So that's, online reviews don't have to be a bad thing if they're negative. It can be a good thing. It can be a leaping off point, and it can be, the kick in the pants you might need to go get more good reviews to balance out the star rating from that one negative that pulled you down, right? So there's things you can do to handle it.
You have to ask yourself, is it true? Like, did you miss the boat? I mean, of course, that comes out in your response, but if you did, own it.
Yeah.
Just own it. And, it could be a bad employee had a bad day or whatever, and it is unacceptable.
Yeah.
It is unacceptable. Sometimes it happens, but it's not always the client. Sometimes it's on your end or on your team's end, and you have to own it.
Yeah, I think a while back when we had Cotham on the show, he talked about a client of his that, spent $50,000 on a client's credit card on accident. They run ad campaigns, so they have their clients' cards on file, so it's not like a theft situation. But like, he made a mistake with the ad campaign, and it spent like an extra $50,000. And Cotham owned it. He, went with integrity. So that would be a good kind of example to go back and watch.
And
people that are
when we say integrity in that situation, the client probably wouldn't have picked up on it.
Yeah, that was what he was saying, is that the client would have never even known. They were running so many ads and spending so much money that they would have never known. They could have done some stuff on the back end to get the client the ROI back and, done it that way behind the scenes. But instead, he went and talked to the person. He worked with his staff member. It was an honest mistake. And it just happened, which is wild.
But they didn't cancel their contract. I mean, they were upset, but they didn't cancel their contract with him.
Yeah, because he was honest about it. And it's like, you don't know if the next company you hire is going to do it and not tell you.
In our business, in our industry, well, in the marketing industry.
Yeah. Recovering marketer. No longer.
Moved on. But in the marketing and advertising paid. Good luck.
There are a ton of well-meaning grifters in the marketing space. And I say that with love because, a lot of them don't set out to be. They don't realize they're doing what somebody told them to do. They're doing what other people have said have worked, and they haven't learned how to make sure that it's working for each individual client. The strategy is sound. When it fails for one client, they don't know why and how to fix it because they don't have the experience or the knowledge or the whatever. It's well-meaning, but there's a lot in the marketing space, a lot, unfortunately, which causes the flip side where, those of us who are operating with integrity tend to get taken advantage of, which kind of brings in this next question here. What's the difference between honoring a commitment and being taken advantage of? Melanie, you want to tap in on this one? As we know, all of our people-pleasing ADHDers tend to dive into being taken advantage of more.
The personal development world and the wellness industry, right? So just the wellness industry as a whole makes more money per year than the pharmaceutical industry does. Just so that everybody understands it. Both in the billions, but the wellness industry. So you can picture the personal development industry, Tony Robbins, Mel Robbins, Abraham Hicks, all that. That's a very big industry. And there's a lot of people that are very good marketers and not very good service providers. And there's a lot of people that are really good service providers and are not very good marketers. So if you're thinking, if you have a calling on your heart to help certain people with a certain problem, it's your responsibility to stay committed to serving those people and to speaking up when somebody is overstepping your bounds. So that means you've got to have confidence and you have to be able to say, that's not going to work for me. And I work with people, some of my clients I talk to multiple times per day, whether it's a text message, whether it's a Marco Polo call, doesn't matter to me. And I have yet to be asked something that I could not help them with, whether it's directing them to this person or sending them a piece of content that I actually just saw that pertains to this, whatever it is. And I've had a few recently that have signed up with me that have been like, well, what is too much? And I just look right at them and I say, I'll tell you when we come to it. So I don't want you to be worried about like, oh, is this message too long? Or, oh, is this not something you can help me with? Go ahead and ask me, because then we'll both know exactly where the limits are. But I can do that because I'm not worried about being taken advantage of. It's not something that happens to me traditionally. I don't get steamrolled. I am the steamroller. So really knowing who you are at your core and working on, we all have to continuously work on ourselves. There is an opportunity multiple times per day to realize maybe a shortcoming or maybe where you are subpar at something, and to also realize, wow, I know a lot more about XYZ than I thought I did. So being open to it and understanding that if you can clearly communicate, then you don't really have to worry about being taken advantage of anymore.
I like that. And then the business designer in me says we design the things the right way in the beginning, right? Now, some of it is a learning experience because, like you mentioned, you're not going to necessarily know all of your limits until you hit one.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the point where we have to adjust and we redesign and we refactor some of that stuff in. But a lot of times just spending half a second and thinking about where somebody has pushed you to a breaking point in the past, where somebody has caused you to feel a way that you don't want to feel, and baking that kind of stuff into your contracts. Like if you were somebody, like we had a student who in her goalpost and guardrails exercise said, I'm not going to answer text messages, emails, phone calls outside of working hours. And she set defined working hours. So that's the flip side of that. Most of us are going to say, I don't want interrupted when I'm on personal time, but then they don't clock out.
Yeah.
So personal time and work time are like, boo, 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 and they're the same thing. So she had to set strict working hours, but that was one of the things that she wanted. So if a client was consistently pushing that boundary and it was baked into the contract that I'm only going to answer calls and messages during business hours, that's part of it. I keep saying bake these things into the contract too. And I want people to understand if you're going to do that, that also means you need to review the contract with the client live, in person, Zoom or whatever, not just send them a copy of it and hope they read the whole stupid thing through, because they won't almost ever. Right? Like they're going to sign that thing and be like, boom, done. And then you're going to come back 2 months later and be like, look, I said not to do this. And they're going to be like, well, I didn't see that anywhere. Look, it's right here, page 3. Well, I didn't read it. Right. So if you're setting all these expectations and you're putting them in writing in a contract that someone's going to sign before working with you, take the time to read through the contract with them, answer any questions, and make sure they understand. This is called expectation setting.
Yeah.
And we have to do that. And if you do that, then you're able to enforce your boundaries, because people are going to push your boundaries. They're always going to push them. They're always going to see what they can do. And it's not always because they have ill intentions, right? Sometimes they just don't realize that boundary exists. So they're just like, woo, here we go. So,
Yeah, and sometimes it's honest. Sometimes things come up later and they ask because they're like, oh, guess what? They have an epiphany or they realize something that they didn't know when they originally started talking to you, and something comes up. Their intentions might not be to push a boundary, but when you have established a boundary, like someone expecting you to answer their calls after 6 p.m., for example, and you clearly and explicitly said that you will not do it, and they keep calling you and calling you and calling you, expecting you, calling you, texting you if they have that, and emailing you, expecting you, and then getting really irate and mad when you don't. This is a person who can't respect boundaries, so you have to respect your own boundaries enough. So you can say, look, because I've had a client like that, not a bad person, but he would answer his phone around the clock.
yeah. I
But
like
he
that
had
thing that you say,
that.
your emergency doesn't become my urgency.
Right.
Yeah.
That for me, that's a major thing. It's like, no, 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 no. I'm not going to be working on, because when I'm home, my family time is my family time, even if the family is just me. Like before I got married. But when I was married, this guy, I am married, but he just whenever he had a problem, oh my gosh, he would just blow my phone up and everything. And then I fired him as a client.
I don't take clients who have nonstop emergencies and problems, and we're not doing that. Like if everything is an emergency, everything is like drop everything and change everything. We're gonna have a conversation, because sometimes they don't even realize they're doing it.
Oh,
And then
once
they realize it and keep doing it, yeah.
Because that's the way he did it. It wasn't constant because I made sure his stuff was good. But let's say sometimes the site goes down because of some issue, and it's like 8 o'clock at night or 9 or 10 o'clock at night. Look, dude, it's not that serious. Like your phone is not ringing off the hook like that to where I have to address this at 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. I don't. And you're not paying me for that privilege. And I think another one was he flew off the handles when he was one of my first clients. So I had learned a few things, not necessarily for him, but as you go along, I think I did his website. That was back when I was doing websites. We did his website and he paid me at the end when the project was done. Mm-hmm. Then I implemented like these milestone payments where I would take 50% up front and 50% before I delivered. You live and you learn, because I got people to pay. So I'm not going to, and I did it in the beginning. So when I did a redesign of his site and I sent him an invoice for 50%, he lost his marbles. Like I had just totally, and I said, look, we're working and I have people to pay. Yes, I did that in the beginning, but I'm only asking you to pay half. I mean, he just lost his marbles. And then eventually I was like, you know what? I mean, every time I interacted with him, my anxiety level was here. And I said, you know what? I don't like feeling like this. I don't like, it's just these people. And everybody has those people in your life that when they come around, your body goes haywire.
Yeah.
And those are not the people that you want to keep around. And they could be very good, well-meaning people. Their energy is too much.
Yeah.
The energy was too much. And I fired him. And he was like, Victoria, do you not like me? Or you want one? I said, I like you. I respect you. I just I can't work for you.
Well, and I like that phrase you said earlier, they're not paying for the privilege. So when we talk about understanding the difference between honoring commitment or being taken advantage of, If they paid for the privilege, you're honoring the commitment. If they didn't pay for the privilege, you're being taken advantage of, right?
And he
Because
doesn't
like
want
we're
to.
talking about what we don't like. We don't like, these emergency 24/7 on response things. Some people, their businesses are built for that, right?
Yeah.
Like web hosting companies, their businesses are built for that. They need 24/7 around the clock support. They need to respond within minutes whenever somebody has a problem, when a website goes down. That is the business model. People are paying for the privilege of 3 a.m. My website's down, help.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that business is honoring that commitment because they charged for that service.
Right.
Right. So
Yeah.
I think that's like a great litmus test. I don't know if you meant to drop that knowledge bomb, but are they paying for the privilege? Was that how you set your services
And
up?
as Melanie said earlier, they typically are the ones who are not.
Yeah.
They want to
And I
suck
mean, we
the life
used to
out of you
be
and
that
pay the
way.
least.
Like back in the day when I was hosting websites and stuff for people, we used to be that way. Like our phone would roll over to our personal cell phones. The office phone would roll to the personal cell phones outside of office hours. If somebody called at 3 a.m. with a website down, I would get my butt out of bed and I'd go work on it.
Ooh.
Yeah, I very quickly realized that was not the business model for me. I'm not built that way. We're not going to be doing that. Right. But that's how it started.
There's even a movement recently for higher ups and stuff in their email signatures to say, I'm answering this email at a time that works for me. Please don't feel like you need to respond at a time that doesn't work for you, or something to that effect. Because there are a lot of us that do want to check our email at 8 p.m. before, we're getting ready to like tuck into bed and whatnot. And then there's some people like Christina that only checks their email once a day. So, communicating what is the level of urgency on this message is also important.
Yeah. And you can even do some stuff like if you're one of these people who only checks your email once a day, you could put that in your email signature so it gets added to all of your emails by default.
Yeah.
You can set up an autoresponder if you want that says I only check my emails and respond to emails once a day. I do it at 10 a.m. every, expect a response within the next 1 to 2 business days.
Yeah.
So done, ready to go. Right.
Yeah, that's definitely expectation setting, communication.
Yeah. And a lot of that goes into, we see so many people talk about how to like set expectation with clients. It starts in business design. It really does, because this is where we say what we're going to do and how we're going to do it and who we're going to do it for and what boundaries are we going to set to protect ourselves and to protect our teams, to protect our clients from themselves in this process and all the dumb stuff that they're going to do, right? We account for a lot of that in the beginning of business design. We document it in our sales processes. We document it in our contracts. We review it and talk about it incessantly with our clients. That's one of the things that Chanel and her partner Danielle do, is teaching people how to train their clients into being good clients, right?
Right.
And it starts early. Like Melanie models this in her lives that she's doing on TikTok Live. She models it in her content. We're modeling it all of the time in what we do with students and how we talk about them and how we respond and how quickly we respond. We're being intentional in training our clients into being good clients. Even in our freebies, even in our lead magnets, we're starting to educate them and train them. So by the time they're in our world, they understand our language, they understand what we're doing, they want it, they're bought in. It starts early.
Yeah.
I think we've got time for one more question. I'm trying to figure out which one to pick. How about this one? Because our people pleasers are over deliverables. This happens a lot. I know I'm guilty of this one. I feel like I owe my clients more than what they paid for. How do we reset expectations? I do this all the time because my brain's going 1,000 miles an hour. And I know exactly what I want to do and exactly what's going to work for them. And And I'm like, boom, I want to go do it all. And then they're still over here being like, what is it all? What are you trying to do? What am I buying? I don't know. I trust you. Here's my money. And they have no idea what they even bought. I don't even know that I have an answer to that one other than being clearer about the scope and stuff up front. That's,
It's important to have a level of free value that you're communicating all the time, right? So all the pieces of content that I put out on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and on my emails and all that, I'm happy to tell you every last piece of information that I have in my brain for free on these platforms, simply because that's going to establish me as a leader in my industry and as an expert at what it is that I do, so that people are more likely to just hop onto a call with me and say, here, take my money, I want to join your program. But because I do all that, I don't feel like I owe people more than what they pay for. And I do not have that thought in my brain of, I just want to help everybody. I don't want to help everybody. There's a huge population of the world that I don't even want to communicate with. And we don't have to say who that is here and now, men, cishet men. But I owe it to myself to make sure that I have everything that I need so that I can help my clients with what I told them I was going to help them with. So if you're stuck in that mindset of like, oh, I feel like I need to give more, then you probably would benefit from giving more out in your free content.
Yeah. And I get that question
if it's
a lot.
stemming from over giving and people pleasing, then you got to go back to, okay, why you're feeling that way. Like,
yeah,
because sometimes you're undercharging and feeling like you're overcharging. That's not, I have this conversation with somebody frequently who shall not be named.
It kind of dovetails into this other question, so I popped it up on the screen too, because they're kind of related. Like underpricing yourself because you feel obligated to help people. That is one of the things that drives some of the worst business design decisions that I ever see, is because people are like, my time is full. I want to help more people. I had 10 meetings this week. 8 of them couldn't afford to pay for my services. Maybe I'm charging too much. Maybe you're talking to the wrong people.
Yep.
Right. It's not that you're not charging enough. It's that you're talking to the wrong people. Now, there are situations where somebody is designing a service, trying to get it priced a certain way for a certain market. That market can't pay that price. Right. Mm-hmm. It does happen. I will say that is more rare than somebody thinking like, nobody can afford my thing because they're talking to the wrong people. That happens most of the time. Right. Occasionally we are priced wrong for that audience, and we have to look at, okay, do we change the service or do we change the audience?
Yeah.
Right.
And the thing is, sometimes we make decisions before even talking to, we just assume they can't pay.
Yeah.
Well, we assume because we wouldn't pay that price for that service.
Just like, oh, but I want to help people who can't afford. No, stop spending other people's money.
Yeah.
Just because you have money issues doesn't mean
10, 20,000 for a website, because I can build a website. I've been building websites for 18 years. So like, I can't imagine $10,000 to $20,000 for a website. I have been paid $10,000 to $20,000 for a website multiple times over, because other people who don't know how to do one will pay to have one done. We're always going to undervalue the thing we do.
$500 for something that's easily worth $5,000 because of your internal money issues.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's a major one, and I see that probably more than we care to address, more than you see people addressing. It's like, because you would struggle with the $5,000, you have a hard time charging it because you're not in that space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's some internal work that has to happen there.
I used to think it was purely just a decision made out of like lack of resources, right? Like exactly what you're saying. Like, I don't have $5,000 to spend on it. Why would somebody else spend $5,000 on it? But what I found particularly interesting was that this continues to happen even as people have the money. They could still continue to underprice their services. They still do it. And it just seems like it's mostly related to undervaluing the thing that you can do yourself.
Well,
I can do it myself. I can't fathom paying somebody that amount of money to do it. So therefore I can't fathom charging somebody that amount of money to do it. The other flip side that happens is the altruistic need. I feel bad. I want to give back. And let's be real. You can't do that until you're making enough money to do it. But if you still can't get a handle on that, put some guardrails, create a scholarship program, right? you'll take one client every 6 months, one client every 3 months that you will give a really good discount to, or that you'll do a little bit of free work for, or da-da-da-da-da-da. Put guardrails on your altruism. Don't let it lead you into products or services that you don't want to do. Like I see this all the time, particularly in the coaching industry, where they start launching group coaching programs because they want to be able to help more people. They think it would be beneficial. They can charge less because there's 10 people paying for that hour of their time instead of one person paying for that hour of their time, et cetera, et cetera. Most of the time, it doesn't work, right? The coach is not good at doing group coaching is one scenario. Like they're good at one-on-one, they're bad at 1-on-10. Doesn't work well for them. Sometimes it doesn't work for the client. Like Melanie had that situation because people don't want to share their mindset gremlins in a room full of other people. They want to share them with Melanie. Right. So she ran into that issue with her group coaching that people were there, they were hanging out, they were getting vibes, but they weren't getting transformation. And that also frustrated her as a coach.
Yeah.
Because they're not getting the result. And I've talked to a bunch of coaches that have had that issue. She's not the only one. I've talked to a bunch of them that have had that challenge where it's like they can't get people to move forward in a group setting, but in their one-on-one, it's like boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
All day long, right? So
and then you realize in those scenarios, they're paying for the privacy.
Yeah.
They're paying
back
for
to paying
you
for the
might
privilege.
not realize it until you try that. But they're paying for privacy. And then when you change the model, now that the thing that they value to most is the thing that you take away.
Yeah.
Assuming that and another thing is I think it really gets into the mindset issue too, is the value you placed on you.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to charge more than you think you're worth. You're not going to be able to sell it. If you don't believe you're worthy of it, which is what I run into a lot. Well, not as much because now I'm dealing with the different, but I have. If you don't think you're worthy of it, then it's you won't be confident, as Melanie talked. You won't be able to be confident selling it.
Yeah.
And
that's going to be
they
true
can
about
feel it.
anything that you're trying to sell. If you're not confident in it for whatever reason, which is why we have a mindset coach on staff at the academy. Because if you're not confident in what you're selling for any reason, because you don't feel like you can fill it, because you can't communicate to the client, because you don't like the client, because you're not charging enough for your time, if you're not confident in it for any reason, you can't sell it. You can't market it, right? So a lot of people think about this in terms of sales calls. Like, I'm going to struggle on a sales call. You're going to struggle with even getting out in the marketing world and making social media content or emailing people about your offer or asking any of your referral partners to promote an offer because your mindset gremlins are sabotaging you. Right?
Yeah.
Such a good topic.
And I fall into that category. I was so proud of myself like last week when I wanted to take on a project and I'm like, I just want to help. But I would have to charge at least double what they were able to pay. And it was a decent amount. It's just that I already knew. And I said, you know what? I said, I would be doing you and myself a grave disservice if I took this on. Because one, this is not the best use of my time and my skills. And if you're going to pay for it, I'm going to deliver at the best value that I can deliver. And I can't do it at this rate. And I said,
there's different business models for different people, which is why it's good to partner with people, even people that you would deem to be competitors, because you're high touch, low volume. There's other fractional COOs, fractional CMOs that are high volume, low touch.
Yeah.
They've systemized, they've built overseas teams that can work more efficiently. They have everything kind of set up so they don't have to charge as much and they can get stuff done. The relationship's going to be different. Some people want someone who's high touch, low volume because they want the personal attention. Other people just want to get the work done for the least amount of money. And if it's not done perfectly, fine. We'll take some typos, we'll take some glitches, we'll troubleshoot them along the way, whatever's got it, let's just get her done. Right. So there's a business model on both sides, understanding what yours is, aligning with clients that are a good fit, partnering with people who have the opposite business model in the same industry makes a lot of sense. So I know we're like a couple minutes over. We've got to head to campus to do the co-working call. So what I want to do is invite everybody to head over to neurospicyacademy.com/events, because we're talking a lot about why things are important, answering some questions about it. But the hardest part is always integration. How do I take what I learned and apply it to my business, to my clients, to my products and services? And we do that in free events on campus. So we're starting to invite people over to come on campus, learn from our mentors. Tomorrow, Queen V is actually going to be talking about staying in flow. You've heard us kind of hit on that a little bit and how important that is, and being able to actually, yeah, it's going to be good. It's going to be good stuff. So Victoria's going to be doing that tomorrow. And then when it comes to all things client fulfillment and making sure that you're training your clients to be good clients, we've got Chanel Robe coming on next week on campus to come teach people how to do that, right? How to train your clients the right way, how to be able to keep your word, how to be able to do it without losing your freedom and sanity. So head over to neurospicyacademy.com/events. Check out everything that we've got upcoming. Sign up. You can come completely for free, experience our campus, our mentors, meet some of the other students. And then, of course, we'll invite you to join if it makes sense. So we will see you there. All right, let's head over to campus, everybody.